start officially our event. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our event, Satellite for IoT and Underserved Areas, sponsored and hosted by the Wireless Communication Alliance, also known under the world of Connected AI. Let me show you a brief overview before we really start the show. I hope you can share, you can see my screen. It's always the first question. Yeah, go back. Okay, here we are. So May 22, 2025, satellites for IoT and underserved areas. Most of you may know our concept already, our mission. Here, the Wireless Communication Alliance, founded in 1994. The World of Connected AI, formerly Wireless Communication Alliance, is a non-profit business league dedicated to collaboration in the industry of connected AI. We started in Silicon Valley only 31 years ago. But now since COVID, we changed to Zoom and Teams, and we are worldwide. What we do from 100 feet above, we connect and networking people. Almost there, some housekeeping rules. Please use the Teams Q&A section for your questions. Presentations and recordings will be available within 48 hours on our social media. Greetings to the world and thanks for being our guest. And a question, if you want to speak or sponsor, please contact sponsor at WCA. A small thanks, a big thanks actually to our sponsors and partners. Without them, we could not make it to this event. So if you like this event, I'm a good CEO and president. If you like this event, please tell your CFO to write us a check. If you don't like this event, say nothing. And here we are. So satellites for IoT and underserved areas. We have a wonderful panel together. Franz Meuwiesen, founding partner of Amplify No Globals, is the moderator. We have Andy Doe, President and CEO of Embedded Works, Diego Paldao, Director of Market Development of SAE Satellites. Then we have David Wiggleworth, Vice President from Echocan. And last but not least, actually I should done ladies first, Sam Schartman, Strategic Leader in Public Infrastructure. With this, my job is done so far. I stop sharing and hand over to Franz.
Good morning and good afternoon.
It's yours.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Very much appreciated. Good morning and afternoon and evening to everybody. Thank you for joining us in this panel discussion. Quite excited about the topic and particularly about the panel members. Indeed excited. This is a hot topic. It is, of course, one of the continuous focus areas for growth within the industry, and it provides a lot of technical challenges as well as a will to tackle it all. I'll just jump in with a brief introduction of myself, and then I would like to have the other panel members introduce themselves, starting with Samantha from the back end. And with the introduction, please also share what you are focusing on and what you find of a driving motivation within this topic in your daily life. So with that said, founding partner in Amplify. Sorry, Samantha, I'll just start with the tiny little introduction of myself, and then we'll get to the more interesting parts. Thank you. So founding partner in Amplify, we are a business development consulting firm. We help companies enter new market spaces within the technology industry. And I think there will be, if there's any other questions in regards to what we do, let us know. Samantha, welcome on board.
Thanks so much, Franz, and thank you, Peter, for having us all together to talk about something that's such a hot topic. So my name is Samantha Schartman. I am the Director of Philanthropic Programs at Connect Humanity. Currently, I lead what is called the Appalachia Digital Accelerator Program, where we have worked with 68 county communities across 11 states to do broadband planning. So we have been talking a lot about satellite. And so I'm coming here to kind of talk about the perspectives of how satellite functions and is seen in rural areas. It is one of these things where it is often said, well, you know, rural, we don't have the population density, the terrain is difficult, mountainous and rocky. We should just do, it's very expensive to either trench broadband or even hang it aerial. The pole infrastructure is often poor. And so, you know, it is very common in conversations about connecting rural areas to talk about satellite as the answer. However, we have had quite a bit of experience with particularly mountain areas in Appalachia having difficulties with the technology. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about where it's a fantastic resource and where there are shortcomings that might not make it great, and encourage our administration and thought leaders to really think about how we create a framework for determining when it is or is not appropriate as the technology selection for a particular group or geography. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Samantha. Greatly appreciate that. I would like to segue to Andy. Would you like to share a brief introduction and your choice and focus?
Thank you, Franz, and thank you, WCA. Andy Doe here, president of Embedded Works, and we also have other brands somewhere above me. You can see my interest and hopefully a contribution today is not only talking about how satellite can connect people, but how satellite can connect things. And there's stats of like 46 billion things that can be connected by 2028, and seems like three-letter words are really the rage. These buzzwords these days: IoT, now it's NTN. So my hope is that we have a conversation today about what it means to connect things and how those things help efficiency from rural areas, ag farming, maritime places where maybe cellular doesn't reach quite well, or maybe as a complement or a backup to when those infrastructures may not be 100% reliable. There's a lot of satellite seems to be the topic of at least 2025, and what our company does in short is we go and help connect infrastructure, smart factories, smart farms, smart buildings, because at the end of the day, these sensors that are out there are either going to help you make money or save money. And that's kind of what we do. And satellite, I see that as being the next wave of technology. And people say, well, if there's products that are going to be in one of these one day, it must be mainstream. This is my phone, and it's happening now. And it's you see it in it's starting to happen in the Apple phones, the Google Pixels, the Samsung Galaxy. So excited to talk about this today.
Thank you, Andy. Greatly appreciate that. Then Diego, would you like to take the microphone?
Sure. Thanks, Franz, and thanks, WCA, for the opportunity. Underserved areas and underconnected areas is not a new topic, and it's interesting that even after decades and decades of trying to connect these areas, we still have these discussions of how to bridge that divide. So it's very timely, but never seems to go away, despite the tremendous expansion and rise of satellite connectivity options. So SES has been around for over 40 years. We've always done communications, remote connectivity, video distribution, things like that. So I'm excited to participate on the panel, have a good dialogue, maybe answer some questions, and maybe uncover the obstacle that's preventing us from getting the penetration we need and really connecting these underconnected and unconnected areas. So thanks again for the opportunity, and looking forward to the discussion.
Very good. Thank you, Diego. Greatly appreciate it. And then David, the mic is yours.
Yeah, hi. Hello. Thanks to the WCA as well for the opportunity. So I'm Dave Wigglesworth. I'm Vice President at EchoStar. I've got more than 25 years of experience in satellite IoT. And I built Iridium's IoT business from zero. In that time, things are beginning to change. So if you go back and look, how many millions of units are actually satellite IoT based, it's still not that many really. And there's lots of reasons for that, but the primary one is satellite business has been, or the IoT business, satellite IoT business has been proprietary based. So the technologies have all been proprietary. Everything is incompatible with another network. And my focus right now, and I'll stop shortly after this so we don't go through the whole thing, is on NTN and how that's going to change things. And so, at EchoStar, while we've certainly lived through the proprietary network and do provide that capability, the coming change will be standards-based solutions, which will change the whole dynamics and open up new areas and increase penetration in the existing areas or applications across the IoT spectrum.
That's excellent. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you, David. I'll take one moment to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. This is a interactive panel discussion. The questions will be shared with the panel members, and the topics that we will discuss in this panel discussion are amongst the panel members. I'm looking very much forward to a dialogue and hearing everybody's insights on topics with different angles. One thought that I have as a startup is that of course there's always a definition or a difference in definition of what is an underserved area. Is that people, is that communities, or is that business opportunities? And so we have, of course, in this very varied panel membership, I want to start this discussion with how you define an underserved area and why you define it that way, and what you think that are some of the technical inhibitors, but also the business inhibitors to address these challenges. And maybe Samantha, I'm putting you on the spot, but I think that with your particular interest, that this might be a great topic to start with you.
Happy to jump in, get us started. You're right. It's kind of a difficult definition to pin down. In my work, that we typically go with the FCC's definition of whether someone is able to get broadband at 100 symmetrical where they are. Now, most of our rural communities cannot. There are certainly some, but there's broadly a pretty difficult challenge around terrain and old aging infrastructure that has prohibited many areas. And those are the ones that we would consider underserved or unserved in some cases. I would also say that does have an impact on business, because without a robust, usually fiber resource nearby, business is hard, right? You can't have big manufacturing plants or, large healthcare facilities without a fiber connection. And so there is also a challenge with economic development in areas that lack this critical infrastructure.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you for that, and I like the connection that you mentioned in regards to rural communities and the connectivity or the fiber-based element of connectivity. Andy, you in your introduction you were talking about rural communities as well.
Yeah.
And then particularly from automated farming. Is there a coalescence of the two underserved areas, and is there then also a economic play in between the two groups? I mean, it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, I have experience on the commercial side. It was once told to me that a carrier, and I won't name the carrier, they will not put a cell tower in a rural agricultural area if it doesn't cover, I guess. It's under 40 acres, I think was the number, or something like that, and so for them, or at least for the farm tech folks that we work with, they said, well, we need a complementary or a mixed wireless technology to do that. And so what they've done is they've taken one part cellular, one part LoRaWAN, and then now even for very large areas where that's even difficult to put a secondary technology, because you have to mount the pole, you have to have the devices. Then satellite now becomes the third, link to be able to kind of expand that. And when it comes to applications, the first thing that comes to mind, at least in our space, is asset management, logistics. There are no towers in the ocean. Satellite is the only way. So you have millions of containers that are going from the port of Hong Kong to the port of San Francisco. You've heard stories of pirates raiding these ships. You've heard of a kind of chain of custody where the containers are open for counterfeit stuff and swapped out, and so all of that needs to be measured and monitored. And so from a commercial perspective, I think we're looking at how satellite can fill in those gaps. Right, even in the cellular world, there are gaps. There are these brown or spots where the towers don't seem to hit a certain corridor of a neighborhood, so they're having their own problems doing that with satellite, and it's the only technology today that truly covers the Earth, right? And yeah, so I would say chain of custody, chain of asset is really key. And then you have, the many sensors from soil moisture monitoring to water, conservation and all that. And they're typically outside the realms of cellular coverage, right? So I see that being a big thing. And I believe David's point earlier, that standards-based satellite will become a thing, is a thing, and I think that's going to really take the market. Just like anything else, when something becomes a standard, then all of a sudden, you have all these inventions and products come to market.
Excellent, thank you, David. What are your just to tie into that? What are your expectations as then of standards, and how that will spur investments by connectivity providers, all types of connectivity providers?
Well, I think it's sort of a logical demand, right? Because today, if you don't have a standardized based service, it means that you have to go select a satellite network, and you have to integrate. You have to buy their modem, their module. You have to integrate that into your hardware. So you've now got two modules in a IoT device in order to use terrestrial and satellite. And then you have to integrate the network. So you've got two networks to integrate. So now you've got two network bills. So you've duplicated everything. So the costs there have got dramatic. So logically, when you look at standards based, and in this case NTN and 3GPP based, you can collapse all that requirement, because the chip manufacturers are upgrading their NB-IoT, for example, chips, as well as some of the chips that will be in smartphones, that will enable the devices to use both terrestrial and satellite. So it's a single radio. So you just reduce the complexity, because now it's software. It's not any hardware in the field device. So that device just got cheaper, a lot cheaper. And still have to deal with antennas. Some laws of physics are still there. And then on the network side, the satellite network suddenly becomes a roaming network. So, and almost everyone in the IoT world is already familiar, who's run a cellular product, has had to deal with roaming at some point. So, the satellite network is now coming in. It's coming in on the same bill that your carrier is coming in on. So you just reduce the whole lot of complexity quite dramatically. So what I expect the net result is, more of devices, more penetration into applications that go into these areas outside of cellular. And I guess just to point out, we're a little different. The EchoStar Group itself owns several different brands. One of them being Boost Mobile. So we are the fourth U.S. carrier with a 5G standalone network. So we're building out that network, covering more and more population as we're required to. So underserved could be anywhere outside of that area, outside of our network footprint. But also, I think as people have pointed out, there's all sorts of little holes here and there in most networks. I seem to be in the middle of a hole in the cellular networks. No carrier seems to serve me because of the location of the towers. If I go a little bit that way and a little bit this way, things get better, but not where I am. So there's a lot of benefits coming from the end-to-end capabilities, and it's just logical that standardization, right, gets you away from having a 100,000 or a million chipsets for a proprietary satellite network. You get into the tens of millions or the hundreds of millions, and so there's lots of scale economies. From that perspective on the hardware side, there's lots of benefits to people who've already developed integrations to mobile networks. My experience in all these years is a lot of people who came and said, oh, we need satellite, already had a cellular based product, and they needed satellite because their existing customer said, well, okay, this is great, but now I need to go to this area, like an oil field customer, for example, or forestry or mining. I need it to work wherever it is. And I think also now, even if you look at consumer expectations, consumer IoT is a big market. The general expectation across most people is that you can have a product that works anywhere, and that's somewhat true today, but the features and capabilities will increase as we get to deploy more of these standards-based networks. Today we have already deployed, and we've been talking 3GPP and cellular. We've already deployed LoRa service over satellite in Europe. So LoRaWAN capabilities, which enables again a terrestrial and a satellite capability all in a single radio. So we've already been working that as a sort of an alternative standard to NB-IoT in the industry. Different user bases, and that one often used more in utilities. And the satellite piece adds the ability to serve units that are just not economic to serve with a terrestrial-based system. No one's going to put in a cellular tower unless there's a population there. Similarly with LoRa, no one's going to set up a LoRa base station unless there's enough units in that tower coverage area to make it economically viable. So satellite now becomes the natural alternative. And to this point, I think in the industry, we've just been focused on, hey, I can do it better than the other guy. And now the standards, I think, are going to really change that dynamic across the industry because of the cost points that are going to come out, both service and hardware.
And is this also a industry driven? I mean, is there cohesion in the industry for driving for these standards, or what's the baseball club behind the drive for standards?
Yeah, there's definitely a club. EchoStar has been involved for quite some time. There are many other companies, both satellite and terrestrial, because it's the 3GPP, for example, is a mixture of MNOs and MNO ecosystem partners. So there's certainly been a wide range of people interested in this, all the way from startups, to existing, longstanding businesses like EchoStar. As well as the network vendors. So there's certainly, the chipset manufacturers, for example, they see, okay, well, it's sort of a well, if one does it, then everyone else has to do it, because what's your differentiation? You're building a standards-based product. If you lack a feature, then you're potentially at a disadvantage. So most of those guys all see the in fact, not all of them, all see the the need to have the capabilities, new features to add on to their existing product line, so that they're not locked out of a new market. None of those guys would, for example, I mean, if you take a major OEM like a heavy equipment company, they have a lot of products in cellular areas. But when that OEM says, well, it's great that we've got your chipset, but can you do satellite? And if they say no, they're going to say, well, sorry, we're going to have to swap you out because we need to do satellite. So, and then I think, in the IoT space, traditionally, satellite space, at least for IoT, it's traditionally been sold by integrators and value-added partners and OEMs. There's been very little of that sold by mobile network operators, and most mobile network operators have a pretty strong IoT team. So now the sales channels are also going to change. So it's going to become an add-on in that channel. So the distribution, shall we say, the number of people out selling, satellite IoT is going to increase dramatically. So there's a bit of push and pull from the user side. I think everyone expects it to work wherever it will be. Features might be less, but it will work. And then there's the industry seeing it as a new paradigm, where they also see the demand coming from the customer base.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. That's great. You touched upon a couple of things that also resonated with a couple of members in the audience. We had, in particular, two questions in regards to actually the definition of underserved areas, because they don't have to be only rural or industrial. It can also be urban. And so the urban canyons and coverage valleys, which then can tie into the type of connectivity and products that connectivity really is servicing, which you also addressed or touched upon in regards to IoT. Or a consumer type of bandwidth or products that they want. So how, as a satellite provider, and Diego, I'm segueing to you with this one first of all, but by all means feel free to chime in, anyone. But how, as a satellite provider, if you are wanting to take full advantage of standards, and then also see that as an opportunity to minimize or indeed minimize costs for providing access to underserved areas, how then do you choose what type of connectivity you want to prioritize and invest in as a company? Because I assume that is one of the big hurdles for solving the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so SES is not a retail supplier, right? We don't go down to the consumer level. We've always worked with partners, with channels. We've provided sort of that middle mile connection. We work with a lot of telcos globally to give them that big pipe with an SLA to transport their traffic back, right? So we're fairly agnostic when it comes to sort of what sits beyond our modem or our satellite modem or the router, whatever is separating us from the telco's network. And it's a little, I mean, it's I'm sure it's frustrating, especially for the communities that Samantha works with and everybody else around the world, that we have the capabilities. Like we have all the pieces of the puzzle. But if we're honest with ourselves, the reason why there's still underconnected and unconnected people is because of money, right? As I think Andy or someone mentioned earlier, it's about return on the investment, right? A company's not just going to throw money in a hole, right? They're going to go to the government and get funding, and then how efficiently is that funding used? No one's going to dig through a mountain to lay fiber. Okay, well, let's go to satellite. Okay, satellite's not a comparable solution in a lot of places to fiber. So you can't compare apples to apples of fiber solution in a city, a satellite solution in a rural community. It's just different things. And I do love what the LEO world has brought in here, which is suddenly there are solutions, which in a lot of places is going to help solve that gap. And not just the primary two that are out there today, but as there's another at least 3 or 4 LEO broadband companies building systems and constellations. I don't know how many we need. I don't know how many we can justify globally. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball to look 10 years ahead and say, hey, who made it? Who's still around? But really, we like I said, we have all the pieces, right? We give connectivity to companies, telcos in the U.S., Orange, Telefonica, KDDI, Optus. Carriers are here in the U.S. We give them that middle piece that gets them, and they can provide it from their tower, from their radio, whether it's fixed wireless, whether it's using existing infrastructure, whatever it is, it's all there. It's just a frustrating thing that at the end of the day, we all have business to run. This money's got to be there, and I think that's where the government funding comes into play a little bit to sort of offset. Hey, we understand you're not going to make millions off of this, but we'll help you pay for it because we think it's important to connect people. But I think a really important missing piece is what do those people do once they're connected? Like who trains them to leverage that connectivity to improve their way of life, to have better farming techniques, to maybe leverage it for education for their kids of their rural area. I think there's maybe a missing piece of that puzzle where if you give someone internet access, are they going to spend most of their time watching dancing cats and TikTok videos? Or are they going to go, great, how do I get my product on a global market? How do I increase the yield of my crops? And I think that's kind of a piece of the puzzle that's missing is maybe getting people trained on how to leverage this new technology. And I'll pause there for others to add some comments.
Samantha, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I just want to, say yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like all of the things that Diego mentioned. You're right. There's the different technologies don't do all of the same things. They have strengths, they have weaknesses. Some of the things that I have not heard brought up, but is a hot topic in the rural areas, is the use of satellite for emergency services and disaster relief efforts, and even monitoring of like forest fires and things in national forests and things like that. So we can sort of how you would monitor your soil levels. For farming, you can also see if things are starting to get too hot or, creating conditions for fires, things of that nature. And that's been such a difficult nut to crack in a lot of rural areas because the areas that they have are vast. No one park ranger is going to be able to cover and see everything. So there's some really great opportunities as well with satellite and IoT that could really change the way of life and improve things for a lot of people in rural areas.
It's fantastic. I like the focus on the driving motivators and how you can unlock the demand from the recipients. Anywhere. How do you spur their entrepreneurship and their creativity and recognize what connectivity can do for them in healthcare and education, and what you say, Samantha, also very much in security, really, not only protection from like weather events and for example fires, but also just protecting agriculture and the food supply. Because if you connect all of that, then it can be things can happen. So that's so the security element of it is also a economic driver for improving and increasing access.
I'd like to add one more just little nugget is, when we talk about, smart ag, we often think of these large industrialized farms with, the professional tractors. Around and through Appalachia, because it's mountainous, you don't see a lot of those really big farms because there's not that much flat land. But what you do see is that because these are food deserts, you see a lot of small individual properties and individual family farms, so that are there just to feed families and maybe a few neighbors and things of that nature. And so when you talk about the gap in skills and the gap, there's a real market to engage a smaller market of low-income families living in food deserts who need alternative ways of providing and sustaining their families. And I think IoT could provide such a great service to help inform and provide feedback and education to families like that. So it's a smaller market, but it's no less significant for the areas.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Andy, with your perspective from technology, how do you see this, and what is your angle on drive? What drives this?
Well, I mean, I look back at the last few years of some satellite leaning applications that we've implemented. One comes to mind is the Canadian forestry. As I mentioned, there's no towers up in them parts, and they needed to not only track the equipment, but I also think that they had to equip themselves with a true satellite phone, for example, for emergency, because personal safety, and emergency devices are certainly needed there. And now, they could possibly use an iPhone or whatever and have an emergency type of service. So it's starting to, reverberate through the consumer devices. And from, our company SensorWorks, where we have thousands of different sensors, from everything from temp, humidity to CO2, vape, all these sort of sensors. I think a lot of them would serve well to be satellite ready. Of course, battery and cost will be a different issue, but there are certain applications where cost is not the primary directive. Safety and being able to prevent hazardous conditions, that's kind of the main thing. So I'm excited to see this NTN movement to bring more and more products to market. You take LoRaWAN, for example. Technically, it's a proprietary technology, right? It's invented by Semtech, but the amount of sensors that exist out there, it rivals that of Bluetooth, which has been around for much, much longer. Right, so there are a lot more toys that we get to play with and connect and get to serve all sorts of industries, and it doesn't, I guess I'm just constantly amazed what people are using these connected IoT things for. At the end of the day, having these connected things, you need to have, in my view, kind of the IoT three-headed monster. You need to have great product, you have to have great connectivity, and you need to have some sort of platform or something to ingest and monitor these things. So that's the IoT triangle to me. And I think as more and more of the chips become available, the products become available, the sensors available, that they're going to see these applications that you would think, it's in a city. Why do I need satellite? Big deal. Well, maybe, it is just more easier to implement than go lay down some fiber or go build a tower. I mean, it's just there. Of course, line of sight, open sky, can't cheat physics on that. But there's a lot of cases for that. So I'm just excited to what products can come out.
Yeah, excellent. And
just bring one other point up there is, we just saw in Spain, right, the nationwide power blackout. So it's not just that you don't need it in the city. There's the urban there. That caused a lot of the cellular networks to go down. And that's not the first time it's happened. It won't be the last. In Brazil, many of the trucks that are used to carry goods to market in order to get insurance have to be tracked. And at one point, one of the cellular networks went down every day for 5 days in a row. So there's all these issues which you don't expect but do happen. They're not frequent, but depending on your application, for example, in the scenario, the Brazil scenario, those trucks couldn't move because they weren't being tracked. But the ones that had satellite could, because satellite's independent of the area, and that's the other aspects of satellite that it brings, which is, I think, today you have to make a pretty hard choice on the economic numbers to say, okay, well, I'm going to spend money to do this, and a sharp intake of breath, when you present the numbers to the CFO. But I think the change in the future will be that the incremental cost will be so much lower, because you're not having to set everything up in the way that you do today. So there'll be a lot more opportunity for, well, you know what? I don't need a full, satellite capability, but I do need that if the cellular stops working, I do need the ability to keep my business running or my application running. Or, it's one of those applications where it has to keep running all the time, no matter what, because it's monitoring, utility point or something critical, or it's, local government. So I think there's a range of other reasons for using satellite just beyond the, hey, there's no cellular network.
I was going to say, David gave me an idea to, it's like the backup to the backup, right? So I think IoT for satellite should be named insurance of things, right? So just to make sure that everything is, what's your backup's backup, and I think that's worth a lot. And you think about, the expense that you might add to it, but if that truck were to go missing, what does that cost you? If if that system were to go down, what does that cost you? So yeah.
Tying into that, so what are then the IoT or business applications that really drive satellite connectivity access requests or demand?
I mean, generically, what I see is things that move, because that's one of the problems is if things move and they move out of terrestrial network coverage, then where are they? What are they doing? Have they been stolen? Are they at a work site? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? So there's a lot of it's all related to that movement of things. Things that are bolted down. It's a little different, although we did see one application for things that don't move that are moving, and that was a scenario where they have pumps, and periodically those pumps have to get removed for maintenance. And then where did they go? Where are they? And so they're the valuable assets, and they wanted to keep track of them, no matter where they were, even though probably 99.5% of the time they're not moving. And again, I mean, the ability to meet that business case, is back to the economics of, okay, so what happens if we lose one? How we have to replace that? Do we have to have more, a larger pool of spare ones to put in place while we're waiting for these pumps to go for maintenance? So there's a lot of questions for that, but it's all the classic questions you ask in IoT, which is, is this going to save me money or make me new revenues? But I think with, from my perspective, I've always had to work with companies and do what I always called value engineering is I know what you expect to get through a cellular connection, lots of data. You're going to have to temper your expectations, and you're going to have to decide, what you really need. And most of the time it works out, but there's additional cost, right? To figure out how do you get rid of, how do you only send the important bits of data? But the applications generically is things that moves, whether it's tracking a truck, a plane, a ship. I think there was a question in the chat about containers on ships. That's been solved by multi-network capabilities, short range on the ship, and then longer range, once it's off the ship. So there's many ways that's been solved. It's just, I think the costs change. The fixed site applications, they tend to be more in things like agriculture, oil and gas, minerals, forestry, and those kinds of applications. And then, there's the whole consumer market, which will, today, Garmin's one of the leaders with InReach. That market will change, I think. There'll be a lot more people just using their phones. which will have an IoT-like capability built into them. But there still will be a market for dedicated devices, dedicated consumer devices, because I'm not going to trust my phone in the middle of Patagonia. I want a device that I know is dedicated and will not stop working when I drop it out of my backpack into a rock or down a cliff. So I think that generic sort of split between mobile applications and fixed, and it is across the spectrum from industrial to regulatory uses to consumer.
Yeah. How about you, Diego? Is that also confirming with your the insights that you get from your clients?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the IoT world is not one we're super close to yet. We're actually considering rolling. So, everyone's really excited about Leo. We've been doing MEO and Geo for over 12 years now, which is a whole different offering. But because of the transition of users into the Leo world for a lot of their sort of requirements that aren't critical, right? The ones that best effort connectivity is good enough. It's freed up capacity on the Geo ARC, which is allowing us to maybe reconsider using that. And we're going to be launching some IoT products in the future that leverages our geo connectivity. So it's certainly there, as Andy was mentioning, for example, the importance of having everything connected and having everything, know where things are, know where it's going, know where it should be. That's a box. Then there's also, we have a utilities customer here in the US that uses our geo services to monitor their energy output, their meters, all those things, right? And then there's the more critical things like, is this pipeline, is there a loose bolt? Is there suddenly a drop in pressure? Is there an increase in pressure? And I think that's sort of the role of IoT in that world. And to comment on the question in the chat earlier, yeah, I don't see IoT as sort of the solution to the broadband requirement, right? I think IoT and broadband underconnected people are two different things. But there are ways. Years ago, there was a discussion I had with a medical company that had clients that were doing medical testing at home, and it was hard for them to get from their rural location back into a clinic close enough to pull data off of their machines that they were wearing in their household. So there was a perfect use case where they would install something on the house and they could pull the data from the user's Wi-Fi network over their system. It was small, it was kilobits, it was versus the world that we live in now today. It's mostly broadband. So
yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that. Excellent. And then Samantha, you also followed up in the chat with the observation that particularly for some use cases, emergency like in Spain and whatnot, that there's going to be a need that the single point of failure is going to be access to energy. And that is not necessarily the case in many locations, but are there underserved areas that not only suffer from lack of internet access or communication access, that also suffer from access to reliable energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly if we're talking about the US, there's fewer of these, but there are some around rural areas, oftentimes in very rural, very low income, distressed areas. There is also vandalism, and we've seen that repeatedly in some places, in some very remote places, where they will have some lines and they might have some copper lashed to that, and because they think that there's something that could be sold, people will pull it down and try to get to the copper so they can sell it, and it takes out the power for an entire village or community. So that still exists in other more developing areas. That's a real problem that's super prevalent. Many of the places that I've worked a little bit, like in Africa, Uganda areas, we heard about that quite often. as being a big blocker to any kind of connected technology. So absolutely, still a concern.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Very interesting. Not to jump too wildly from one subtopic to another, but David, you mentioned also a conversation in the chat in regards to bolts and satellite access to bolts. One of the questions there was in regards to equipment. You know, the modems on that are used in containers, whether they're on the outside of the container or on the inside, how that impedes communication access, as well as is there an opportunity to cut or to realize some cost savings by combining those modems and having one solution that addresses the different use cases.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of ways as well how you skin the cat. I mean, today there are solutions out there that basically they're cellular based, and so when the container is driving around on land, it's communicating with the cellular network. When that container gets loaded onto a ship and it's still on shore, it's still going to connect to the land. When it moves further offshore, though, they can activate a picocell on board the ship. At which point the cellular devices then start talking to the picocell, and the picocell is actually backhauled using satellite. So from that perspective, that sort of solution has already been proven. And I think with the advances in NTN, it probably doesn't necessarily change a lot of that, because you need that short range capability, and with a ship, you can put the infrastructure on with the antennas for the picocell in optimal locations. Resolve that. I mean, a container ship is a tough sort of environment, both from the salt water environment perspective, but also from an RF perspective with all the metal around. So it's all different ways to solve it, but at the end of the day, your issues come down to signal propagation, and you may be able to get some signal out if the device is, for example, inside the container, but only if you've got a local network. High and likely it's going to reach a satellite network directly from inside a container, especially not at the bottom of a container stack. So you sort of have to layer up these solutions. But again, if you can layer it up based upon standards, it's still going to be cheaper than building something proprietary that is only available to that one. If you use that one container carrier, the company that's operating the container ship, and then all the devices. But I think the key thing is to have a low cost product, and that would drive the adoption. There's clearly value to knowing which containers are where in the world, because you can manage the supply chain much more efficiently. And also deal with all the odd things that always make for great pictures, like the container stack falling off in the Pacific, and where did those sneakers wash? Which beach did the sneakers wash up on? Odd occasions like that, and then also just the basic security. If you can secure the container has a lot of the container itself is not valuable, but the contents are. But it all comes down to economics and who benefits from that. So again, I mean, like the insurance aspect is always one to look at. It's not just hey, I can tell you where your container is. That's sort of so 1980s-ish, right? It's so it's like the IBM advert with the kid who's saying, oh, I can, with the business owner, and you're saying, I can put flames on your web page, and the business owner comes back and says, well, what I really need is a real-time inventory purchasing control system. And the kid says, I can't do that. But the ability to link in more value in is the key driver there. To be able to get that there. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. I mean, we have other applications where there's a mesh network operating on think it's Bluetooth technologies, which is then integrated to a hub, and which is satellite enabled. And so it's all just different ways of maximizing the deployment for the minimal cost. And you obviously, the more expensive components, you want to have fewer of them. So not all those endpoints need satellite. You can wirelessly network them together, and those technologies come together and work quite nicely. So there's a range of things here, and it's not just also the narrowband satellite, right? I mean, there are some wider band technologies. We're looking at that because it's a spectrum, right? You've got endpoints that can live with very low bandwidth connections, and then you have applications that need a bit more. How do you offer that? I mean, video is a prime example. A lot of people would like to have remote video from a remote location just to check everything's okay, as opposed to the alarm system at my cabin went off. Well, is it a bear that entered your house and is wrecking the place? Or is it the spider that's got into the sensor and nothing's going on? So there's lots of different ways to look at this, but I think that the trajectory always is to more bandwidth demand, but tempered with cost and things like battery life.
That's excellent. Thank you, David, for that. It is, I think this is a great segue to the ending of this webinar. We've covered quite a few topics in regards to what are underserved areas, what drives the use cases, where does the demand come from, some of the technical inhabitants. So it's been a very wide-ranging discussion, which I'm extremely appreciative of. And to add to it is we also just received a note that we have to be mindful of legacy systems like in Africa 2G and 3G, which also really can be a doorstop in regards to providing more access in underserved communities. On that note, I'm also extremely excited that our automated note taker Firefly has assigned some tasks to some of our panelists that will help us solve all the problems of underserved communities. So that is AI to the rescue. With that, I would like to invite all of you to share a last parting thought, if you are inclined to do so. And then very much want to also afterwards thank you for your time and all your inputs. Who would like to start? Who would like to be first with parting thoughts? David, may I put you on the spot?
Yeah, I'll go. I think for me personally, I've been in this satellite IoT space for over 25 years. The key thing for me, is why is it still interesting, is the what I'm looking for in the next 5 years. I think there's going to be a order of magnitude change in the number of IoT devices that will be using satellite, simply because of the move to standards. What we've done in the last 25 years has been great, but it's just like what most bosses say is, well, what got you to here isn't going to get you beyond tomorrow. I think they have to look at that as a new opportunity, and I think there's going to be hopefully a lot of new different applications that people haven't thought of. And the penetration is going to go significantly higher, and we'll reap the benefits of that, both from an industrial, commercial, government, regulatory, as well as consumer perspective.
Great, thank you, David. I very much appreciate that. Andy, may I put you on the spot?
Sure. Yeah, for me, for satellite, I for one, as a distributor of embedded components and routers and systems, today, if you don't have in your product brochure that you are NTN or satellite capable, your product seems inferior, in some regard. So there's going to be, this mass adoption where whether you need it or not, it will be a technology that a lot of these manufacturers will start to implement. So I see that as this wave coming. It may be less than 5 years, that mass adoption, because it took us a while for all these standards to kind of bubble up. And I think with satellite technology, whether you have narrowband or broadband, particularly broadband, I think today's call, we didn't mention Starlink, for example. I think that kind of that brought the conversation globally to what is kind of this connected world and internet anywhere and internet for all kind of concept. So again, I'm excited to see the small things that are coming out with the IoT, but also the ability to BYOS, bring your own satellite kind of thing into a village. I think that will happen. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. Very much appreciated. Samantha, I'm gonna end with you because you started.
Okay.
Diego,
Okay.
any last bits
Yeah.
of wisdom that you would like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Franz, and thanks everyone for joining the session today. I guess, SES is providing solutions in all 3 orbits today. And personally, I'd love to get involved in more projects to connect under or unconnected areas. So feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. I appreciate the forum and the opportunity to talk about these things. Again, I'm pretty sure that if we fast forward 10 years, we'll still be talking about underconnected and unconnected areas, even though we're going to have a tremendous more amount of capacity in the world. So I think it's about finding out the solutions that put together that meet the economic needs of the operator and the community that's underconnected. So look forward to hearing from people.
Thank you, Diego.
Awesome. Well, I think this is such a rich conversation, and what I'm going to be taking away from this is that our tapestry of connected technologies has really gotten more and more diversified and intricate in its patterning. And I think there's a challenge to the field on all sides to figure out where the right place for the right technology is and how these things blend and work together in a strategic and functional way. And I think there's a lot of that needs to become more mainstream awareness, right? I think there's the normal consumer level adopters, the local governments who's looking to build broadband plans and plans for disaster recovery and things of that nature. These different options and functionalities need to come in, and there's a real call to educate a lot more people about the wealth of information that you all have. So I would hope that the conversation can continue and enrich and bring in a wider audience so that we can best understand where these technologies belong in our everyday lives.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Samantha. That's an excellent way to wrap up this conversation. It's a pity that we only have so little time to do it, but if there's an impetus, we can reconvene and dive deeper. With that, I would like to pass the mic to our hosts at WCA, Peter.
Thank you so much, Franz, for being a perfect moderator, and thank you for the panelists also. Roundtable discussion was very, very exciting. I'm waiting for this satellite event since many years. A little bit from my former time. I'm in this wireless business since mid-80s, starting with GSM and so on. And my first satellite project was with Hughes Network Systems back in Germany, mid of the 90s, Terrestrial. I didn't finish this because I got transferred to the USA end of the 90s. But about 5 years ago, I was in one of these satellite world events in DC. And then I saw Hughes Network having my baby, my child, Terrestrial on display. So Terrestrial was a communication system for Middle East area, northeast of Africa also. So it took only 35 years for me to see my baby grow. In the meantime, satellite IoT, yeah, I think it will come. We will have more events in this direction. We had events already in the past about location-based services, GNSS and so on. But it is a very, very limited use case, a very important use case, and we will do more IoT and wireless technology in the future. And I count on you, everybody, to be part of it. You hear our killer dog, our beagle barking in the background. That is live. Yeah, thank you so much again for everybody, and also for the good contact and information and question from the audience. With this, thank you again, and see you soon. The presentation, like I said, and the recording will be available within 48 hours on our social media, so for sharing, and we'll let you know. Thank you. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in this world. Yeah, and see you soon again. In about 6 weeks, we have our next event. Just monitor our events. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Franz.
Thank you.